Well, the day has come we told you was going to come. California lawmakers have now lowered the penalties for pedophilia to accommodate the LGBTQ agenda. See, this is what happens when you give Democrats a supermajority share of government. Progressivism and perversion merge. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, that only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms, college campuses, and the whole state of California around the world. Today we start in the land of fruits and nuts, where California legislators just passed a bill softening criminal penalties for LGBT adults who have sex with underage teenagers. Yes, I said that correctly. It's all love, right? Love knows, one of the mottos of these clowns, and you see them in California all the time, these activists, is love knows no age, right?
Yeah.
And so therefore, it just seems a 25-year-old boy, a 26-year-old man, 24-year-old man who has sex with a 14-year-old, well, this is just sexual freedom, right? And so now they've radically scaled down the potential penalties here, keeping in mind that the 26-year-old man who has sex with the 14-year-old girl is going away for a long time.
This is true. The California General Assembly, which has a Democratic supermajority, they advanced the legislation, and so it's Bill SB 145. And of course, it was introduced by a state senator named Scott Wiener. He's an openly gay man, and he seeks to prevent gay adults who sodomize or perform oral sex with underage teenagers from being automatically assigned to the California Sex Offender Registry. So they're, just as you said, trying to soften the crime that they commit. The legislation actually calls for a judge to use discretion on when to assign an individual to the sex offender registry if the victim is between the ages of 14 to 17. So as you said, teenagers. And the age difference between the offender and the victim is less than 10 years. So they're going to leave it up to a judge now to make that distinction.
It's completely arbitrary, right? So if you're a 50-year-old having sex with a 15-year-old boy, that's somehow horrible, and we're not going to do anything about that. But if you happen to be 26 and having sex with a 15-year-old boy, well, that's a different thing. How exactly is it?
It's not. But the bill actually passed the Senate on a vote of 23 to 10, so only 10 people were sane, and it passed the assembly by a 41 to 18 vote, so only 18 people in their assembly are sane. And Wiener actually claims that this bill eliminates discrimination against LGBTQ youth in our criminal justice system.
Right. How so exactly?
How?
Yeah, and so here you have a situation which is not surprising. And look, I just found out from my niece who lives in Texas that when she was a young high school student, she was being told by in one of her classes that young girls should consider anal intercourse as a safer alternative to vaginal sex. So in other words, sodomy is a safer, according to what she heard, a safer form of sex that girls, right now you could practice and you don't have to worry about getting pregnant. That this is what was being recommended. We know in middle school classrooms in places like California and other places, they're mainstreaming what we used to call sodomy, right? They're mainstreaming this. They're talking about anal intercourse as if it were exactly not just the equivalent of vaginal sex, but as my niece pointed out, actually superior because nobody gets pregnant.
Wow. Look at the bonuses there. From the San Francisco Chronicle article, it says, under current law, a judge can decide whether to place a man who has vaginal intercourse with an underage teenage girl on the sex offender registry based on the facts of the case. But if anal or oral sex or vaginal penetration with anything other than a penis is involved, the adult must register as a sex offender, a relic of a penal code that criminalized those acts until 1975, even between consenting adults.
She said penal code.
I also said penis.
Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, you
just a little blast.
You're
from the past.
a little Beavis and a little Butt.
And so there's the so-called discrimination, right? That, in other words, they wanted a way to. There was a weird gaffe in the system there that men who had sex with their penises with underage girls, there was some discretion apparently in terms of the judge deciding. Now the judge gets to decide. Now they've changed it, right? So everybody gets, it's all purely malleable now.
See, in all of this, just is exactly what's happening at the federal level.
That's
Is what's
exactly
happening with our legislators, and then it goes to the judiciary, which now just basically is the legislature. It's one and the same.
One of the great undiscussed problems in American culture today is the absolute reckless abandon of their jobs by Congress. I mean, it's Congress's job to make laws, to provide budgets. They're doing none of it, and you've got now you've got the Democrats now saying we're not even going to negotiate with you because if we give you another stimulus, Trump wins. How we got off this topic, I don't know. You made a great point, though. When it comes to the underage sex stuff, this is the great new frontier. They have mainstreamed. I already said they've already convinced your kids that sodomy, whether it's homosexual or heterosexual, it's a perfectly legitimate, perfectly safe form of sex. We've demonstrated many times that condom packages themselves, condom packages made by manufacturers who want to not get sued, tell you that if you're using these condoms for anal intercourse, it's not as safe. That there are diseases that are transferable through the condom. It's not as safe as vaginal sex, and it's a problem.
Well, we at least have, as I said, a few people in California who are still sane. And one of those 18 who are in the state assembly, one is named Lorena Gonzalez. She's a Democrat, and she said, I cannot, in my mind, as a mother, understand how sex between a 24-year-old and a 14-year-old could ever be consensual, how it could ever not be a registrable offense. We should never give up on this idea that children should be in no way subject to a predator. Thank you. One person. Right,
although her sanity is completely eclipsed by the fact that she's part of a party and a supermajority in California that routinely does stuff like this. And to get annoyed, good, I'm glad she's got some semblance of a conscience. I'd like to know her vote on, did she vote to put the radical sex curriculum in? I bet she did.
Hey, don't start assuming with her. You got to look do your research then.
It's a super majority. My point is that even the sane Democrats in California, I'm not even sure you can use the word sane, because a sane Democrat in California would be a radical left-winger in most of the middle states in the country. This is the problem with the supermajority that they have here. It is basically a rubber stamp for the worst kinds of progressive excesses. And you know Gavin Newsom's going to sign this. And here's my point. If we're making these arguments, the moral and equivocal sexual arguments we're already making to children, how can California lawmakers justifying having any boundaries if sex is just a choice and age is relative, it's just a number, and we're taking little kids in late elementary school all the way through high school, and we're encouraging them, we're egging them on, not just to having sex, but to having all kinds of experimental forms of sex, to becoming so open-minded in their sexuality that there's no sex act that they would consider problematic or humiliating or shameful at all. If that's what we're doing,
well, we're going to stay in California because land of the crazy's got to stick together. So we're going to talk about another bill in California that has passed the Senate and the Assembly, and it will force all schools to offer their high school students a semester-long ethnic studies course starting in 2025, if and basically when signed by Governor Gavin Newsom, which, he's going to sign it. It's AB 331. It's called Pupil Instruction, High School Graduation Requirements, Ethnic Studies. Now, we've talked about this before, and here's more of it, so you can keep remembering it. Because if it happens in California, it'll sweep the nation. So this model curriculum that they have right now states that the course should build new possibilities for post-imperial life that promotes collective narratives of transformative resistance. Gobbledygook, gobbledygook.
And notice again, the purpose of education is post-imperialism.
Yes, and it also teaches something called the 4 I's, the letter I, of oppression, because that'll help the students remember the 4 I's of oppression. And so you're asking yourself, what could these 4 I's possibly be? Would you like to take a stab at what these 4 I's could possibly be?
Idiocy, illness.
Should be.
Incomprehensible stupidity.
You wish.
No?
No, I thought indoctrination certainly would be one, but it's not. They are using ideology, institutional, interpersonal, internalized. Gives me the warm fuzzies.
Now, let me stop you there. The 4 I's of
oppression.
And give me the first one.
Ideology.
The entire school system in California now has jettisoned academic standards for ideology. The nerve of you pretending that ideology is what you're fighting. What's the next I?
The next I is institutional.
You are an institution, public schools. You are forcing your ideology into kids in your institutions that they have to go to. So strike two. Who are the colonials? What's the third I?
Interpersonal.
You are using interpersonal relationships. You're having teachers bully students. You're having students bully other students into this systemic bigotry and colonialism based on an ideology. And what's the fourth I?
Internalized.
And you're making them internalize it, right? You're forcing them to confront their white supremacy. Little toddlers who happen to be white, guilty of racial demonizing. You are the walking. This is classic projection, right? Progressives do this all the time. That which they say they are fighting is exactly what they're doing. They're using ideology in the institutions interpersonally to grind kids into powder who disagree with them. Those four I's that you think you're fighting, you are projecting.
Yes, and they have already approved more than 200 pages of course outlines and some of the learning objectives, because that's what we call everything, the learning objectives, what you're supposed to learn during this course, that are already found within these approved course outlines include students will acquire and expand on an awareness in the value of speaking about the agency, power, and the creative genius of ethnic minorities while acknowledging the processes of slavery, colonization, discrimination, and bigotry that also color the American experience.
So you have mandatory history lessons for gays. You have mandatory transgender history. You have mandatory union history you have to teach kids in California schools. You now have to teach them ethnic studies. You already have diversity studies. You already have sexuality studies. Do you see a pattern here, California parents? Where is math? Where is science? All they care about is turning your kid into little confused clones of themselves. And if you've taken a look at them, it's the last thing you want your kids to be cloned as.
Another learning objective for this course is that students will be presented with a different perspective of the conquest of North America. This will start with Christopher Columbus's genocide of the native population, calm down, continue to the relocation efforts of early America, and to the development of reservations up to the reorganization of said reservations and the American Indian movement. Go.
Let me start from the beginning. I defy you to show me how Christopher Columbus had created genocide. Name me the genocide that Christopher Columbus presided over. Show me what Christopher Columbus did to incite genocide. Please, show me. And if you can't do that because you can't do that because it didn't happen, your entire curriculum is predicated on falseness and lies. So in other words, you have completely jettisoned your responsibility to teach anything like civics or traditional history. You are not only not teaching the American experience or what liberty or freedom or even the founding documents require, you're simply lying about it. You have created a curriculum so that you can lie, cheat, and rewrite history to get these kids to conform to what you want them to be. You are brainwashing these kids. There's no other way about it. You are lying, you're cheating, you're dishonest.
Indoctrination.
In the big I, though, yeah, very well said. The one I that you are actually preaching and following is the I of indoctrination.
By now, Mom and Dad, you should know that you will want to keep your kids out of any California school. And now that schools basically across the whole nation are physically out of school and most of them are on Zoom, just know that they can get kicked out of class still if they don't have their vaccines up to date. And that's what happened in one school to one family. Diana Vu, who is a mother of a 7th grade student at the Fresno Unified School District's Tioga Middle School. She said her daughter was actually dumped from her online classes because of a 4-day lapse in her vaccination schedule. I couldn't even believe that was possible, but here it is. Talk to Diana Vu.
Even though kids are not physically in classrooms in Fresno right now, the vaccination schedule required by the state hasn't changed.
I think I've checked every single day, twice a day, to see if anything's changed, but the requirements still stand.
Diana Vu says her daughter got kicked out of her class on Zoom and told she could not participate, even though she has an appointment to get all her shots on Tuesday.
She's just gonna have to be behind on assignments. And I was like, that makes no sense. You guys cannot help them at all. That's just stupid. So, I mean, I was livid.
Yeah, the purpose of school is as a crutch or a cudgel to force you to do what they want. Why I can't understand why these moms are surprised by that. When it comes to what they're teaching them and in terms of how little input parents have, when parents complain they're completely blown off, why are you surprised that they would not use this power we've allowed them to have to beat you over the head like with a stick? Your kid's going to do what we tell you to. And I can tell you this, the minute there's a coronavirus vaccine, even if it's not completely tested, even if we don't, we rush it to market so elections can be won or lost. As soon as it's available, regardless of the consequences, California schools are going to make your kids take it. Now, again, whatever you think about the vaccine, anti-vaccine questions, free country, believe what you want. But rushing a vaccine to market without years of testing, are you really comfortable when California says to your 11-year-old, she's going to take that exam, she's going to take that vaccine, or she's not coming to school? However untested, however little research there is in the long-term consequences of the vaccine, get ready, California, because your parental rights don't matter when it comes to stuff like this.
But the simple fact that they're not even in class. Like,
right.
Even if it was, okay, if they were in class.
It's 4 days.
It's 4 days and they're on Zoom. The only virus they're going to catch
is a computer virus. And 4 days later, you're still going to be online.
And that's the thing. So Jane Banks, who's the director of health services for the Fresno Unified School District, said the shift to online learning hasn't changed the state's school vaccination requirements and that there have been daily reminders to the parents since July. Because that's what they're focusing on.
A couple of months ago, we did a show where, this is the California standards about sex education. They haven't gone, they're still law. Right, so if you're learning at home, or if your kid he's going to have to get a sex education, right? Your kid needs to log on and get his sex education, because if he's not doing that, you're in violation.
And that's what is happening in all the schools, is we're putting such focus on the thing clearly that don't matter more than learning how to read, how to write, how to do math. It's all about control. It's all about control.
These are lessons, whether we're talking about sex or the new 1619 history curriculum, or we're talking about vaccines, or we're talking about ethnic studies. The entire premise of the American public schools is conformity. Mm-hmm. We are collectivizing your kids.
Banks added, she said, "We have the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools Health Mobile coming on site. I have my own Fresno Unified Health team who are also administering immunizations. United Health Centers were at 3 school sites this week, and we're planning more for next week. So we're really trying to make it easier for families that don't feel safe going to the doctor's offices." That's what they're focusing on.
First of all, who doesn't feel safe going to a doctor's office?
We're not allowed to, because, especially in California, you're not allowed to do anything unless you're Nancy Pelosi and you don't want to get your hairs did.
So you're not going to force them to go to a doctor because of COVID. You're shut down because of this.
But they're coming on site.
Right, but they're coming, right. So
and we're focused on that, not like, kids, come get, I don't know, a book to read.
We'll bring it to you. We'll bring the shot to you. And so the collectivism of this is a very dangerous thing. Your kids will conform. What is the one real lesson that you're learning from this in these public schools in California, and in a lot of other places too, is that whatever government says you do, no questions asked, or we will use the full force of government to exclude you from everything. Isn't it amazing how the liberal mantra is inclusion, and that line gets immediately snapped the minute you don't do what you're demanded to do of government?
All right, everyone in California, you clearly need some real education. El Greco, the Greek, was a Greek painter working in Spain in the 16th century. Among his masterpieces is The Burial of the Count of Orgaz, completed in 1586. El Greco was also a prominent Renaissance painter, sculptor, and architect. The painting illustrates a popular local legend of his time. An exceptionally large painting, it's divided into 2 sections, heavenly above and earth below, but it gives very little impression of 2 separate spheres, since the upper and lower sections are brought together compositionally. The painting has been called one of the most truthful pages in the history of Spain, a masterpiece of Western art and of late mannerism, and is the epitome of Greco's artistic style.
Yeah, there's something so cool about the way El Greco paints that when you see an El Greco, you always recognize it. It's sometimes hard to determine a Monet from a Manet, or a Titian from a Raphael sometimes, but when you see a El Greco, you know exactly who you're dealing with. Take a look at the picture. First of all, man, what a whirlwind of utter activity. Katie made the observation that you see that line of men at the bottom third that go from left to right, the men in the ruffs and the black. This is the line that demarcates heaven from earth. And in that notice, by the way, how cramped but expansive heaven is, but how much more cramped and pinched reality is. So underneath, on the realm of the earthly, you see the count, a bishop there, the body of the dead count. You see the priests. You can see the ashen gray of the figure on the left and the priest who's imploring the heavens on the right. This is, and all those noble civic gentlemen of the town, right? They've turned out to watch the burial of Count Orgaz. And she had made the point that the theme of the painting is inspired indeed. Keep watching this. Is inspired by a legend at the beginning of the 14th century. In 1312, a certain Don Gonzalo Ruiz de Toledo, mayor of the town of Orgaz, died. His family later received the title Count, and so was posthumously applied to him. Don Gonzalo Ruiz was a descendant of the noble Paleologos family, which produced the last ruling dynasty of the Byzantine Empire. There's your Greek link, right? Why would El Greco, the Greek working in Spain, have been interested in this? Because ultimately, this particular family traces its roots back to the Greek Byzantine Empire. And if you go back and take a look at the picture again, and that beautiful expanding confusion above the heads of these men. According to the legend, at the time the Count was murdered, St. Stephen and St. Augustine descended in person from the heavens and buried him with their own hands. Go back to the next clip. And so now we find out who are those people. That is St. Augustine and St. Stephen. St. Augustine, of course, wearing the bishop's mitre and the bishop's hat, and St. Stephen to the left there. These two great saints of the Western Church come down to bury the Count. Now go back and look at the top here. The swirling clouds that the Virgin Mary, you see her there in blue and red, the left side of the picture. It's almost like she's body surfing. The clouds there, this coil of angels, this beautiful, complicated narrative that about the Count his soul being welcomed into heaven. And what I love about the picture is, go to the last one, the individual deep detail on the faces of these guys. Everything about El Greco is elongated. Everything about El Greco it walks right up to the line of caricature, but never quite crosses it. Some really great work. Once you see an El Greco, you'll never forget it.
All right, as many of you have noticed, we have these fancy tumblers on set, and they're part of our new Patriot Club. Since Facebook and YouTube really hate us, essentially, they're not big fans of our content, we decided to launch the Patriot Club. For a one-time $99 tax-deductible donation, you can personally help keep this show going. And as a token of our appreciation, we'll ship you this stainless steel tumbler etched with the American flag and the words, "Freedom never tasted so good." Because it never did taste so good. Please visit patriotclub.us to get your Patriot Club membership. That's patriotclub.us. Now we're going to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. And since the whole darn show is about California, did you know that California used to be known as the grizzly bear state? And when the state began to boom and then the bear population, coincidentally, I guess, dwindled, it then became known as the Golden State.
And anybody who's ever seen the California flag would know because there's a big bear on it. And that's going to do it for the show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.